Today, we continue our journey into the life of Manfred of Swabia. In the previous episode, we saw how the son of the Stupor Mundi, despite political intrigue and bloody conflict, managed to hold firm to his power, openly defying the authority of the Pope. But as we'll see in this episode, Manfred's greatest challenge was still to come. Determined to strengthen his position, the young sovereign launched a ruthless campaign to tighten his grip on southern Italy and crush all opposition, until he reached a decisive moment: his coronation as King of Sicily. In February 1256, Manfred moved to consolidate his power within the kingdom, summoning a great curia at Barletta to display his dominant position publicly, confirming loyalties and distributing rewards to his supporters, especially the Lombards connected to the Lancia family. At the same time, he punished traitors such as Bertoldo of Oenburg and his household, sentencing them to life imprisonment, where they soon died from hardships and disease. During the summer of 1256, Manfred reconquered the whole of Sicily. The last pockets of resistance on the mainland, including the Terra d'Otranto and L'Aquila, were pacified by 1257. Manfred's strategy was simple, yet effective. Acts of clemency towards those who surrendered spontaneously, and fierce reprisals against the most stubborn opponents. An emblematic example was Ariano Irpino, which, having capitulated, was entirely razed. The leading citizens were brutally killed, and the rest condemned to exile. It was not an isolated case. To secure his supremacy, Manfred chose the path of ruthless repression, persecuting his enemies even after they had yielded. Thus, the Count of Catanzaro was assassinated at Terracina in 1257. In 1260, Manfred ordered the murder of two of Conradin's envoys to the Pope, and so on. This policy of intimidation soon bore fruit. Before long, fear of the notorious Sicilian assassins spread through Europe, and Pope Urban IV himself referred to them with grave concern in a letter to James I of Aragon in 1262. He never ceased from his misdeeds, and if perchance he desisted for a while, he resumed them in yet more dangerous fashion as soon as the faithful of the Church began to doubt the perils. Thus did he have the late Bussaro, ambassador of his aforesaid nephew, Conradin, slain by his followers while in the lands of the Church and under its protection. And by many stratagems and by force of arms he afflicted the Church supporters in Tuscany, not without great slaughter of men, inflicting injuries and offences, as the fate of the late Pietro of Calabria likewise shows. Once the kingdom had been pacified, though only by an iron fist, Manfred was ready for a daring, decisive stroke. False rumours were spread in Germany that his nephew Conradin had died. As the boy's closest kin, Manfred then had himself crowned King of Sicily in Palermo Cathedral on the 10th of August, 1258. With that ceremony, his rule, hitherto confined to local affairs, stepped on a far broader stage, projecting the young monarch into the wider Mediterranean and European chessboard. He set out about reorganizing the realm at once. Sicily was divided into two great military provinces, Terra di Lavoro and Sicilia Calabria, each entrusted to captains endowed with sweeping powers to keep order and crush rebellion. Such control demanded money, and the administration quickly became a model of centralized bureaucracy and taxation. The chief impost was the colletta, reintroduced after Frederick II and sharply increased to finance Manfred's campaign in northern Italy. A heavy burden for his subject, it was nonetheless a godsend to the royal treasury. At the height of his power, Manfred's revenues were reckoned double those of the King of France and 4 times those of the King of England. Life at court was dominated by the king's maternal king, the Lancia family, above all his favorite, Count Galvano Lancia. The Franciscan chronicler Salimbene da Parma sketches the new elite. The most powerful men in Manfred's court were these: Count Galvano Lancia, by far the greatest of all, a Piedmontese and kinsman of the Marquises Lancia; Counts Giordano and Bartolomeo, likewise Piedmontese; the Count of Caserta, a southerner who later betrayed Manfred, though married to his sister; the Count of Acerra from Terra di Lavoro, Messer Giovanni da Procida, great and mighty at court. Some say he administered the poison to King Conrad at Manfred's bidding. And the Chamberlain, immensely rich and dear to the king, named Messer Manfredo Maletta. Beside these nobles, Manfred promoted a band of his own contemporaries, men not yet 30, probably educated with him at Frederick II's court. They were vigorous and enterprising, loyal beyond doubt, yet painfully inexperienced. The consequences of that choice would soon become apparent. As in every autocracy, propaganda served the center of power, and here too Manfred followed his father's example. He sponsored translation of philosophical and scientific works, among them the pseudo-Aristotelian Liber de Pomo, kept the University of Naples and the Salerno Medical School active, and struck coins that paired his own likeness with the imperial eagle. Troubadours in Provence sang his praises, celebrating him above all as a bulwark against the clerical dominance. His foreign policy was equally vigorous. Sicily, after all, stands at the very heart of the Mediterranean, a crossroads of a maritime trade for centuries. From 1257 onward, Manfred widened his diplomatic horizon. Commercial treaties with Genoa and Venice were swiftly followed by amicable relations with the sultans of Egypt and the caliphs of Tunisia. He confirmed royal control over strategic archipelagos such as Malta, and even nurtured ambitions in Sardinia, though those schemes never quite came to fruition. Yet the true pivot of his Mediterranean strategy remained the Balkans. In 1258 he married Helena, daughter of Michael II Komnenos Ducas, despot of Epirus, abruptly abandoning his father's earlier alliance with the Empire of Nicaea. Through this marriage, he secured key possessions along the Adriatic littoral: Corfu, Durazzo, Valona, Butrint, and the strongholds of Berat and Canine. From 1258 onwards, Manfred began to intervene decisively in northern Italy as well, finally answering the long-ignored pleas of the local Ghibellines. Pleas he had previously set aside while consolidating the south. He appointed Perceval Doria as his vicar general for the Marche, the Duchy of Spoleto and Romagna, Giordano Dagliano, already familiar to us from earlier episodes, as vicar for Tuscany, while Oberto Pellavicino was charged with directing Ghibelline operations in Lombardy, taking the symbolic title of Master of the Ghibellines. To each of them, Manfred sent contingents of German mercenaries, financed in part from the royal treasury. This strategy relied more on military force and on the appointment of royal officials than on any true juridical legitimacy. Manfred's authority rested chiefly on pragmatic acceptance by local communities, an acceptance helped, not infrequently, by the presence of hundreds of formidable German knights in heavy armor. We shall not linger on the details here. If curiosity strikes, do revisit episode 4 and 5 of this season. By 1259, Manfred found himself King of Sicily, master of an erudite, indecently wealthy court, yet burned abroad with the reputation of a ruthless oppressor, fratricide and parricide alike, at only 27 years of age. The next step seemed almost inevitable: press for the imperial crown. Fully aware that the dignity was elective rather than hereditary, he set about crafting a favorable climate through strategic alliances and by courting the Ghibelline cities of northern Italy, Siena among them. His chancery even issued formal documents proclaiming his imperial ambition, an aspiration Siena endorsed in a letter of August 1259. When your envoys, Guglielmo, son of Pepe, and Guidone di Macio, stood before our Majesty, they faithfully and prudently conveyed your wishes. Through their words we clearly perceived the ardent devotion you bear towards our Excellency, and in particular the resolute desire that we should labor with still greater zeal to obtain the imperial crown. Yet it seemed written that this imperial dream would be dashed at the outset. In the autumn of 1259, at the Battle of Pelagonia in Macedonia, the joint army of Manfred, Michael II of Epirus, and William of Villehardouin, Prince of Achaia, was utterly routed by the Nicene forces under John Palaeologus. The disaster, caused above all by poor coordination between Greek and Latin contingents and the effectiveness of Nicaea's light troops, killed Manfred's nascent imperial venture stone dead. And that, alas, was only the beginning of his troubles. In December 1259, Pope Alexander IV exploited the Balkan debacle to isolate Manfred still further, offering absolution to many northern Italian Ghibellines on condition that they sever all ties with the Swabian king. The move put paid, once and for all, to any hope Manfred might have had of papal support and crystallized a conflict between the Sicilian kingdom and Rome that left no room for compromise. Matters in Tuscany were scarcely better. After the Battle of Montaperti, that we discussed in episode 5, Siena had embraced a Ghibelline government firmly linked to Manfred, but the prolonged papal interdict imposed by Urban IV in response to Sienese loyalty stoked growing unrest. Many citizens, especially those whose fortunes depended on business with the Curia, grew resentful of the city's harsh economic and spiritual isolation. On 13th of April 1262, street fighting broke out between Guelphs and Ghibellines. It was crushed with brutal force, climaxing in the murder of a Ghibelline leader. That December, several prominent families, the Salimbeni, Tolomei, and Piccolomini among them, abandoned Siena for the fortress of Radicofani under papal protection. Urban IV welcomed the exiles and formally reconciled them with the Church. They soon reorganized politically and militarily under the pontiff's wing. Thus was born the Sienese Guelph Party. The papacy's pressure reached Florence with equal speed. The city, now ruled by the pro-Swabian Ghibellines under Farinata degli Uberti, found its merchant classes targeted in August 1263, when Urban IV ordered the seizure of Florentine goods at the fairs of Flanders and France. The tactic worked swiftly. By the end of the same month, many leading Florentine merchants had sworn fealty to the Pope to salvage their assets and trade. Manfred's iron grip was closing upon nothing but sand, and the young king had yet to realize it. Far from Sicily's sun-baked shores, storm clouds of war were gathering, soon to take the shape of his most formidable foe, Charles of Anjou, Prince of France. But that, dear listeners, is a tale for our next episode. Thank you.